Engineering, Dr. C.R. Parthasarathi sir, is, is the founder, chairman, and managing director of Sarathi Geotech Engineering Services and Private Limited, Bangalore. He holds BE and ME degrees in Civil and Geotechnical Engineering from Bangalore University and PhD in Geotechnical Engineering from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He started his career as a geotechnical engineer in 1993. He was involved in numerous large-scale site investigation and engineering studies at various levels for multi-storied complexes, industrial buildings, embankments, bridges, water-retaining structures, pavements, offshore platforms, etc. Dr. C.R. Parthasarathi has undertaken pile drivability studies, Jacob Rig Foundation investigations and design, including the Jacob Rig movers. He was involved in the pile installation, monitoring of several offshore platforms, and he has served as QA/QC engineer for several geotechnical investigations on dedicated survey vessels. His sphere of activities has extended beyond from India to Southeast Asia and Middle East, Africa, and USA. Dr. Parthasarathi is the founder director of Sarathi Geotech and Engineering Services Private Limited. The company, with its registered office at Bangalore, India, was established in 2008 to provide both offshore and on-land integrated geotechnical engineering services in India and abroad. As a technical partner of Pile Dynamics USA, he is instrumental in promoting the quality testing of deep foundations in India, an authorized trainer for high-strain dynamic pile testing. He is the Life Fellow of Indian Geotechnical Society and member of several other professional bodies like Deep Foundations India, ISRM, Indian Concrete Institute, Institution of Engineers, etc. He is currently elected as a National Executive Member of IGS for 2018-20 and Chairman of Indian Geotechnical Society Bangalore chapter. We are really honored to have you for this for your presence in this STTP, sir. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. And today he will deliver a talk on QA/QC methods of deep foundation testing with case studies. Sir, please share your expertise with our participants.
Yeah, thank you, Professor. Indeed, I'm very grateful for giving me an opportunity for sharing some experience. Today, the topic of presentation is QA/QC methods for deep foundation testing with some case studies. So before I go into the presentation, I would like to pray Almighty to give strength and immunity to all of us. Amid this COVID pandemic, I wish all of you stay safe and stay healthy. I'd like to give a brief introduction about our company. We have added some new services and products. So then I will go into the topic of today's presentation. So we started in 2007 to provide services on an integrated approach for both offshore and online projects. This is our vision and mission. So we have accumulated large depository of database across multiple geographies. It's just not the geotechnical data, but also the foundation performance because we get involved into testing as well. So that gives us a lot of confidence in deriving the ground model and appropriately design the foundations. We are present in India and in few other countries as well. As you can see here, Indonesia and Saudi, UAE and Vietnam. Our primary focus was oil and gas, but of late for the last few years, we also have significant projects coming from real estate infrastructure, railway infrastructure, mining, renewable energy, and some small aspects from the dam sectors. More than 50% of our service is consumed outside the country, and thus the state government and the central government have conferred the export award consistently for the last few years. I'm sure even this year also we will be honored with this prestigious award. As far as the scope of service is concerned, offshore geotechnical and geophysical investigation, pile drivability analysis using wave equation program, fatigue during driving analysis, pile monitoring using pile driving analyzers. I'll be talking about this high strain dynamic test in this presentation. CAPAP, I will give an introduction to the CAPAP analysis, leg penetration analysis, and punch through assessment of jack-up rig. This is for an exploration project in the oil and gas. The load transfer curves and the capacity estimation. MUDMAT is a shallow foundation problem, liquefaction potential assessment, and this will go into the engineering report as part of the offshore geotechnical investigation. We have large suite of internationally acclaimed recognized softwares, and the recent addition is Plaxis 3D to model three-dimensional soil structure interaction problems. The online sector, always we advocate an integrated approach of site survey, performing a geophysical investigation, identifying the geohazards, and developing the scope of geotechnical investigations. We use all the data together and you design the foundations. Likewise, either it is the offshore constructions or the online construction. Even in the onlines, we do the geophysical investigations using MASW, seismic refraction, cross-hole and downhole test, electrical resistivity, GPRs. So we added all these the last few months. Geological investigations, when you have rocks to evaluate the rock mass and geological mapping. Geotechnical investigations with SPT analyzers. So I'm not going to talk in this presentation, but it's very important to measure the energy transfer to the rods while conducting the SPT, to also apply a field corrections, normalizing to 60%, where we actually use a lot of correlations. Design of shallow and deep foundation, bearing capacity, settlements, slope stability, retaining structure. Board pile testing, PDA and PIT, I'll be talking extensively on this. Cross-hole sonic logging, shape and squid, I will talk about this in this presentation. Geotechnical laboratory. So all the green color ones are accredited to ISO 17025 standards. That is, in the country, it is NABL accreditation. Engineering investigations and designs, payment geotechnics, and forensic geotechnics if there is any failure case studies. Ground engineering and installation solutions. We have been very successful in design and building deep excavation, vertical cuts as deep as about 18 meters as of now in Bangalore. We have added this asset, the jack-up barge, to conduct marine geotechnical investigations. We have the capabilities up to about 12 meters water depth currently. We are also adding this multi-purpose high-end geotechnical drilling rig, which can conduct an SPT test with an automatic hammer using this capstan, can perform a CPT test, wireline rotary drilling. You can do an in-situ vein test, collect samples in soft clays. If you have rocks, then you can switch over to your core barrels and collect rock core samples. So this high-end drilling rig is being introduced from US for the first time in India. This particular product, which is going to be available by end of October. And one of the advantages we are going to derive is to cater for the infrastructure projects of the time. So 50-meter boreholes currently with our existing methods, whether it's a hydraulic rig or a calyx rig, it will take about few days to complete one borehole, but this rig can do 2 boreholes in 1 day. So that is the advantage. So we want to utilize this for a fast-track infrastructure projects. If there is any need, please get back to us, and so we can actually block this resource for the projects, important projects. Now, on the deep foundation testing, static load test, axial compression, pull-out, lateral dissolve, conventional testing, low strain integrity test, cross-hole sonic logging, shape, squid, high strain dynamic test will be the topic of today's presentations. I will start this on the next slide. So this brief introduction about our services, I will get into the topic of today's presentation. So first I will start with the QA/QC methods before the construction of the pile, that is before pouring the concrete, using the shaft quantitative identification device is the squid, and shaft area profile evaluator is the shape. And then I will get into the low strain integrity test, discuss about the other methods of integrity evaluations using cross-hole sonic logging test, and lastly give an introduction to the high strain dynamic load test, which will be a replacement to the conventional static load test by Kentledge methods. So SQUID is a shaft quantitative identification device. I acknowledge Dr. Rospe Mogadam, so where some of the informations I have collected from him. He's also an expert in evaluating this for the software and the hardware and the philosophies that has been developed into this technology. So this SQUID characteristics, it's an octagonal shape equipment which has a diagonal length of about 647 millimeters and a height of about 635 millimeters, total weighing around 188 kilograms. Okay. There are 3 penetrometers at the base. I will show that in the next slide, the pictures, and the 3 retractable plates which are part of the SQUID system, which will be used to record force and displacement simultaneously. All the contact plates are designed to be retracted at a very low pressure and measuring displacement up to 160 millimeter. Of course, the pressure divided by the area of that penetrometers will give you the force. The penetrometers are designed to be used with a conical or the flat tips with an average cross-sectional area of a 10 centimeter square. This is similar to the CPT test that we perform normally as a part of geotechnical investigation. The resistance to penetration is measured by strain gauge arranged in a Wheatstone bridge with the capability of recording up to about 100 MPa of pressure. Okay. You see, these are the 3 penetrometers at the bottom of the equipment, and these are the 3 retractable plates. Okay. So either it can be a pointed tip or it can be a circular tip. Okay. So this equipment can be connected directly into the Kelly bar of the piling rig. Okay. Here you see the equipment is connected to the Kelly bar. So very important to know the dimensions of this Kelly bar so that your appropriate adapter tools are compatible with the piling machine. Otherwise, if the sites are different, then you have an embarrassment in the site. You will not be able to perform the test. Right. So there are 4 bolts. The adapter plate is connected to this rotating table. Okay, and you have this bolt being connected to the Kelly bar, and these 4 bolts will keep this Kelly bar and this adapter plate together. So once you connect this to the Kelly bar and lower into the borehole, then you release the Kelly bar where there is a force on the top of Kelly bar. Then these penetrometers start penetrating into this debris or the contamination, as you could see here in the bottom of the borehole. So why is this important? Particularly the rock socketed piles, which is deriving significant capacity from the base. We all want that borehole to be absolutely clean, and then when you pour concrete and do a load test, I think probably you get most of the capacities from the base. But many times we see the problem that there will be significant thickness of the contaminations at the bottom of the boreholes because of improper cleaning. You pour the concrete, then it doesn't displace the debris at the bottom, and finally when you conduct the load test, there will be a settlement experienced by the pile. So in order to avoid, so quantitatively, we can evaluate the thickness of the debris. If it is more than a certain prescribed limit, particularly in the US, there are some guidelines that the bottom contamination should not be more than ½ an inch. And if it is measured to be more than ½ an inch, then there will be some vacuuming or other cleaning procedures being adopted before pouring the concrete. Okay. So you see the 3 penetrometers and the retractable plates which are going to measure the force and the displacement. So this is attached directly to the Kelly bar. I already explained with an adapter mounted on the SQUID table, and the Kelly bar adapter is bolted with 4 25 millimeter bolts to the Kelly bar plate, and again bolted with 4 19 millimeters to the turntable to keep that adapter and the Kelly bar together. It's also important to note that prior to testing and for an appropriate connection, the properties of the Kelly bar, such as the size, pin, diameter, and location, need to be known. So in order to avoid any embarrassment, I already explained that. Okay. Here is the SQUID assembly. and the test procedure. So you connect it to the caliber and lower down into the bottom of the borehole. The size itself is around 640 millimeter. So the minimum diameter that this can be used is around 750 millimeter. If it is less than about 900 millimeters, you can do about 5 trials at the same location, so that the average of all the 5 trials will be your debris thickness. If you have a large diameter base, more than 1200 millimeter diameter, probably you have to run these 5 trials in different quadrants. One at the center, then move to the north, south, east, and west, and take the average of those debris thickness from all these trials, and that will be your thickness of the debris quantitatively evaluated. Now, so when you lower down to the bottom of the borehole, you can always assign a threshold value, the probe threshold and the debris threshold. As what we can see here, there is about 20 pounds to 150 pounds. Okay, so what is this 20 pounds to 150 pounds in terms of the SI units? It will be around 0.09 kilonewton to about 0.7 kilonewton. The philosophy is that debris is assumed to be a cohesive material with a consistency varying between around 12 kilopascal to about say 100 kilopascal, right? If the material is less than about 12 kilopascal, is very soft consistency, then during pouring the concrete it gets displaced. But if the debris material is more than about 100 kilopascal, it is treated as a natural material. So this is more of a property of the debris material. I think there is a flexibility to alter this if large number of database is available, and the experience indicate there could be some other different values. But I would rather, at this point of time where we have limited experience, so we'll stick to what the manufacturer suggests that. We can apply this threshold. Then you lower down, it touches. As you still further lower down, then you could see the displacement. The 3 probes, one is the green color, the blue one, and also the red one is going to come, right? Okay, you could see the force after the displacement from each of those sensors. So this is the displacement, okay, from the green probe, the blue probe, and the red probe. Okay, and then there will be a force measurement. So I already said this threshold values, you can assign that. So once you are reaching a force of about 1 to 2 kips, which is equal to about say 5 to 10 kilonewtons, probably you can stop the test, which has reached beyond the threshold to be considered as a debris material, which has already reached a natural material. So then you can unload it, you can remove it. So this force will come back, okay, and then the displacements also will come back to 0. The force has come back, and then you retract further, then the displacement also come back to 0. So directly you can see the debris thickness here. So as I said, the threshold values of these force between lower limit and the upper limit is a very soft to and stiff consistency. So that will be your debris thickness. So the philosophy I explained is considered as the cohesive material for a circular foundation. The ultimate capacity is given by this. I'm not going to much detail about it. So if you consider the shear strength between 12 to 95 or 100 kilopascal, so your threshold value for a 10 centimeter square diameter probe will be around 0.09 to 0.71 kilonewtons. So this is the threshold that's going to input into the equipment. Okay, so between these threshold will be your thickness of the debris. Okay, so you can see the thickness of the debris for a force of 150 pounds or 0.07 kilonewtons, and this is for 20 pounds or 0.09 kilonewtons. So the difference will be actual thickness of the debris that is computed by this equipment. Okay. Now, we all want to see that during the test, there's a displacement and there's a nice force. We saw that in the previous slide, right? After that, when you unload it, this force has to come back to 0. And then the displacement also has to come back to 0. But then you could see here the force has come back here, but it is not coming back to 0, but somewhere it is stopping here, one of them, right? And also there's a bending here, right? The displacement is not coming exactly to zero, but there is some bending. So let us examine why is that. So this force is because the material is stuck between the base of the shaft and the retractable plate, and thus is not able to come to zero. So every time you do the test, probably you got to pull out and clean this, ensure that these retractable plates are moving without any contamination between them. And this bending is because these bolts, which should be tightened enough that it will be holding this the template and the Kelly bar in position. Some of them are not tightened properly. Therefore, during lowering and testing, there is always some bending. So these are very small aspects, but very important aspects need to be considered when performing the test. Okay. So when you do the test, the contamination that is going to be established, the thickness of the debris is 5 inches here. One of the case study here, 0.7 inch, 4.5 inch. As I said, if the average of this is more than half an inch, I think some guidelines does not permit. Although in India, we don't have any guidelines as such at this point of time. Probably this is in the US practice. So you do a vacuuming once you have evaluated a large thickness of debris there. And after vacuuming, you do the test again, and you see that the average is less than half an inch. Then you can allow them to pour the concrete. So this is how you see in a enlarged screenshot the force displacement curve. Okay, then these are the threshold values. Okay, so the displacement for a lower threshold and the upper threshold, the difference will be the thickness of the debris in those 3 penetrometer locations. And it's a very, very useful tool for evaluating quantitatively the thickness of the contaminations. And you could also read this directly on the tablet. Okay, the average of these 3 things to be ensured to be minimum than the prescribed limits. So I repeat again, this connection should be compatible, so you can have fabrications ready with different 2-3 types as the number of types of the Kelly bars depending on the piling rig is available. So this we commissioned in one of the metro projects very recently, around 10 days back in Bangalore. Okay, the Kelly bar going into the squid template, tightening the bolts with a cotter pin, and then these will be tightened to hold this in position. Okay. And once it is done, then you lower this squid into the boreholes. This was a 1200 millimeter diameter pile, around 17 meter deep. Okay. And if you have any polymer bentonite, no issues on this. It can work very well. So we put the threshold value here, 0.07 to 0.9 kilonewton, right? And then you see this is 79.4 in one of them, 136 millimeters is the thickness of the debris. Because you see 79 millimeters, 136 and 81 millimeters. This is at the center of the borehole. Then we pushed it to the left, right, and all the quadrants. I think probably they needed to clean this borehole because the thickness is much higher in all the quadrants as well. You could see here. Even in these quadrants, around 70 millimeters, 20 millimeters. So then we asked them to clean, and they did cleaning, but apparently this was just a trial pilot projects. We did not do the test after the cleaning because of some site constraints. And you see that the debris is already clogging at the top of the penetrometer plates. So the first trials, we removed this where you had about more than 100 millimeters of debris. Okay. So this itself indicates that the bottom of the borehole is contaminated. All right, so we'll move on to the next is the shaft area profile evaluator. We call it as SHAPE. The diameter of this equipment is 460 millimeter and a height of about 560 millimeter. It's weighing about 32 kilograms. So you see these are the ultrasonic sensors, which is connected circularly, which radiates these waves outside. Okay, there are about 18 numbers, and also there will be two facing each other to known distance for calibrating the wave speed as this equipment penetrates along the length of the shaft. Okay. So what happened here, when you apply a voltage to the ultrasonic sensor, the piezoelectric element changes its geometry. This will induces the pressure waves, which will radiate through these ultrasonic sensors. When it reaches the wall of the borehole, it comes back and the time is computed. Knowing the wave speed and the times, the distance can always be computed. So this is again an equipment which can be connected direct to the Kelly bar, similar to the squid. Okay, and then lower into the borehole. Okay, then what happens? This data will be acquired 1 scan per second in real time, and this is how you see the data will be acquired. You see the top 10 meters is lined, and beyond that is an uncased boreholes that you could see some small alignment issue. Is a verticality issue, and this also should not be more than the prescribed limit. So if it does, then there will be moment induced in the pile, which will also jeopardize the load carrying capacity. Okay. So as you lower down the equipment into the bottom of the boreholes, along the length of the shaft, you can get the radius. You can also get the volume of the pile bore excavation, and also the verticality of the boreholes, particularly useful for large diameter drill shafts. Okay, so along all the length of those ultrasonic pulses, the directions, because 8 numbers are attached to the equipment, so you can get the geometry of the pile boreholes along the length. Okay. So both SQUID and SHAPE has been a potential quality control tool. It's very popular in the US. And this is a new recent addition. I think in India, we are the first one to introduce that. SQUID is already commissioned. The SHAPE is going to be commissioned very soon. All right, with this brief introduction to the SQUID and the SHAPE, let me go into the other quality control methods. So I want to give a perspective before I start the low strain and the high strain dynamic load test. As we all know, the static load test using Kentledge is conducted, and we apply a factor of safety of say 2 to derive your allowable loads. Okay, there are other methods. The static equation, static analysis, we apply a factor of safety of 2.5. Even our IS code prescribes the same. Globally, it is the same. But if you are using a dynamic formula, some of the guidelines from the Federal Highway in the US states a factor of safety about 3.5. So why this perspective? So the driven piles are not new for civil engineers. It exists for several centuries now. Okay. So in the early days, the simplest measurement that was available was only set per blow during driving. So then there are numerous empirical equations being developed equating the energy transferred to the work done in estimating the ultimate capacity of the pile. So these energy equations, there are many numbers I could see here, the Dutch formula, the Weisbach formula, engineering use record, Gates formula, and so on and so forth. But I draw your attention here on the recommended factor safety from these formulas. It is 6, 3, 6, 3. Hundreds of formulas are available. I'm sure all of you are familiar. But what is important here is the recommended factor of safety to be very high because of the uncertainties I'll explain to you in a minute. Okay. The simplicity of most pile driving formula leads to the major disadvantage is the inaccuracy of those formulas. And use of this dynamic formula in estimating the capacity, the ultimate capacity, exclusively can lead to dangerously low factor of safety or uneconomically high ones. And the variety and number are matched only by their shortcomings. In fact, in 1941, there was an American Society of Civil Engineering conference. Okay, the big names in geotechnical engineering, including Terzaghi and others, they participated in this conference. And many stalwarts, they bought the data accumulated for a decade between 1930 to 1940 and presented in this conference. And Terzaghi summarized this, the percentage of observed loaded failure on the x-axis with various new dynamic formula. Okay, if this formula were to be very good at correlating with the static measured static load response, these data points should have collapsed to this red line at 100% or very close to that. But as you could see here, the variations is between 50 to around 300%. Okay, so this gives very low confidence on the use of any of the dynamic formula. Okay. And thus, this was already discouraged in early 40s. Okay. Now, recently, Pile Dynamics 2015 released this newsletter. They were mentioning this pile design based on dynamic formula was already discouraged in 1940s due to inaccuracies. They were referring to that AC conference. Okay. So during pile construction, there could be several anomalies, as you could see, the necking, cracking, bulging, and this could happen anywhere along the length of the pile, right? Even the driven piles, precast piles during driving could experience stresses, maybe the higher compressive stresses or tensile stresses beyond the limit and experience crack in the drill shafts or the board piles. So this is one classical example. In one of the projects, for a lift pit, they had to excavate little deeper for putting the cap. Right, they started excavating slightly deeper than the other elevations. Then they could see one stirrup here. They excavated little deeper. They could see the second stirrup. Finally, they exhumed the pile. The bottom 3 meters did not have concrete. And this pile should withstand the loads from ground plus 22-story building. Okay. There are many anomalies in the pile constructions. You could see the necking. You could see bleeding of concrete. You could see the breaking of the driven piles at the toe, at any elevations. Even the steel piles driven to rock can get damaged. So once these deep foundations are installed below the ground, so no way you will be able to identify these anomalies by just performing a static load test, right? So in order to be ensuring the safety of foundations, it is imperative that these anomalies should be identified, detected. Okay. So thus today the profession have a whole arsenal of modern technology and tools available to assist in providing efficient and economical deep foundation solutions. So one of the quality control methods, the squid and the shape, is prior to pouring the concrete. And what I'm going to talk now is after placing the concrete or during the construction, if it's a driven pipe. Well, so as I explained, the limitations of the earliest measurement was only set per blow. They did not have any other means to measure what is the energy transferred to the pile, right? And the dynamic formula was discouraged. With that limitation, the research began in early 60s under the guidance of Professor Goebel, which resulted in developing the case method or the pile driving analyzer, which is a pile capacity from pile top measurements. I'll discuss about this. Wave equation analysis program. This is used for a pre-installation analysis for selecting the hammers, which I'm not going to talk today because of paucity of time. CAPAP is a case pile wave analysis program, which is a post-test analysis. I will give an introduction to the CAPAP during the course of this presentation. Now, When there's an impact on the top of the pile, there's a stress wave that's propagating down, which will enter the pile. Whenever there is a soil resistance or the section changes, these downward traveling stress waves will have an early reflection. If both of them are not there, either the soil resistance or the section changes or the impedance change, then this stress wave propagate all along the length of the pile up to the bottoms. At the bottom of the pile, when there is a medium difference, then there's going to be a reflection happening. So this stress in pile can be represented by one-dimensional wave theory, and this stress wave can be analyzed by measuring the pile top force and velocity. So how do we measure this force and velocity? So this is by instrumenting the top of the pile with a strain gauge and an accelerometer. The strain gauge will measure the strain in the member. We know the modulus of the material, which is stress by strain. So if you measure the strain, you know the stress. If you know the cross-sectional area, we can get the force, right? Using the strain gauge. This accelerometer will be measuring the motion of the pile. Integrating that will give you the velocity, right? This is a relation. The force and velocity are proportional with a constant impedance, which is defined as the modulus cross-sectional area divided by the wave speed. I'm not going to derive this in this presentation, okay, but we can now take it that the force and velocity are proportional. The constant of proportionality is the impedance. Okay. Now, when you mount the sensors on top of the pile and an impact on the hammer induces a stress wave, the massive stress wave travels down. When it starts traveling into the pile, okay, and then it will travel along the length of the pile by a distance L, right? You see, this is the initial rise of the stress waves, and as it reaches the gauge location, this is your initial peak. Now, when it reaches the bottom of the pile, there's a toe response, right? But this toe response is not seen by the sensors unless these stress waves travel back another distance L and reaches the sensor locations, right? Essentially, there is a 2L, one on the downward distance and the other one has to come back. And we know the wave speed, that is your C is the wave speed, twice the length divided by the wave speed. We know the time in point, okay, at which the toe response can be visualized, okay. So here is the description. The response from the pile toe will not be observed at the gauge location until the initial stress wave has traveled down the pile and back again. That is a distance of 2L. If the length of the pile below the sensor and the wave speed of material are known, then we can calculate the point in time where the toe response will occur. Essentially, the toe response will occur at a time 2L divided by C, okay. So after a time of 2L by C, then you see the toe response, okay. Now, actually, we are happy to inform all of you that we are technical partners of Pile Dynamics in conducting training, workshops, and providing consulting, promoting these products useful for the Deformation Institute, for industry. Okay, this training on the high strain dynamic test includes the wave mechanics background, proper practice, how to do the test correctly, PDA data quality assessment, application and interpretation of the data, CAPAP, theory, operations, and examples. Actually, this is a 3-day course. We squeeze it into 2 days, including the demonstration of the equipment and also get a hands-on feel of those methods. This is a paid training. If anybody is interested, please contact us and we can customize to your needs. And also, Pile Driving Contractors Associations, along with the Pile Dynamics, conduct a proficiency test. You can see the information on pdaproficiencytest.com. This is a closed book. The topics covered will be like this. There'll be 14 questions on this wave propagation, 16 on PDA data interference, so on and so forth. There'll be total about 70, but some of the questions will be repeating in different aspects. And finally, there's a 60 questions, 90 minutes. Okay, cell phones are not allowed, calculators are not allowed. The number of right questions divided by 60 will be your evaluation on the score. Okay, to prepare for the exam, probably the workshops and the training will be useful. Some information from the manual, helpful hints are there. There are a lot of literatures in pile.com. You can read those materials. So if the score is more than 75% is an advanced level. The many companies around the world, they prescribe that the PDA testers should have achieved minimum of advanced level or higher. That gives a lot of confidence and make a on-spot decision on the test results. I'm very proud to say that more than a dozen of our engineers are certified advanced level or higher from India on this proficiency test. You can see this information on pdaproficiencytest.com. Now, let us get back to the test aspects. Test on board piles, as we all know, can have a low strain pile integrity test or an high strain dynamic load test. So we'll discuss both of them now. Okay. This low strain integrity test is codified as per ASTM 5882. We also have an IS code 14893 2001. Okay. The low strain integrity test is a quick, cost-effective method to evaluate the shaft integrity of concrete piles. The testing is able to provide information on the pile continuity, the location of defect, and the degree of defect. Okay. This will not give the bearing capacity of the pile. Okay. The test method is performed with a handheld hammer and a sensitive accelerometer in the pile integrity tester. So why do we do the test? We do the test in order to find defects, assure quality, and reduce the risk. I also showed there are many anomalies during the pile installations. So when these piles are embedded into the ground, no way you can evaluate any of those anomalies unless it is tested. Okay. Many times we don't test, and we have seen failures in deep foundation also. Okay. So which pile do we test and which pile can be tested? So any of these piles could have a defect and all the piles can be tested. So this low strain integrity test being a very simple test, the current practice is to test 100% of the pile in the project. So consistently, if you have some anomalies on the installation problems, it will be detected with very simple means, and thus the contractor can take precautions for the subsequent installation, and thus you can mitigate any problems further. So as I described you on the hammer impact creating a compression wave, stress waves, even for the pile integrity test, we mount a small axiometers at the top of the pile and give an impact from a handheld hammer. This impact induces a downward traveling wave. At the base, when you see the bottom of the pile, there is a response from the soil, also creates an upward traveling wave. Okay, so these are all very small pulses from the low strain test because your impact is very small. Okay, what you could see here, a force and velocity time history. I already explained, this is the top of the pile. 2L/c time thereafter, you see the response from the pile bottom. Okay. Now, force and velocity are proportional. That's where you see both of them on top of each other here. Okay. At 2L/c, there is a difference here. So let us examine, and this is due to the end conditions. The pile bottom can have two extreme end conditions. One is your free end, the other one is your fixed end. Okay. Now, the downward traveling compression wave is a stress wave will be in compression. When it encounters the bottom of the pile, if it is a free end, for example, it is a soft clay at the bottom, then the reflected wave will be in tension. So that is pulling the particles down. That means the pile is moving. So when you start driving, the pile is easy driving. So without very small energy, the pile start moving. So what will happen to the velocity? Velocity will be positive because it is moving down. That is where you see that at the toe, the response, the velocity is positive. It indicates your free end. Okay. The force can be 0 and or maybe negative here. So that is the extreme conditions. The other scenario is a fixed end, where the piles may be embedded into the rock or rock secondary pile. The compression wave, which is a downward traveling wave, when it encounters the bottom, which is a fixed end, it reflects back as compression wave itself and not the tensile wave. So this compression wave will elevate the force at the bottom, but the velocity will be 0 or negative. Okay. So the simple interpretation here, the response of the pile toe at a time 2L by C after the first peak, right, will be a positive velocity if it is a free end, or a negative velocity if it is a fixed end. So these are the two extremities, but for our practical considerations, the pile will be anywhere in between these two extremities or end conditions. Okay. Now, here is how the test is performed. You mount an axiometers on top of a pile, okay, with a small handheld hammer, give an impact connected to the pile integrity tester, and you see the velocity time history because you are getting the data from the accelerometers. You can also have the instrumented hammer with you can get a force measurement. This is the top of the pile, 2L by C time thereafter, you see the response from the pile toe. Okay, so the velocity is positive, it indicates your free end. When you see an anomaly, a necking like this, anywhere along the length of the shaft, before the stress waves reach the bottom of the pile, since it encounters the anomaly, there will be an early reflection happening here. So if you see a positive reflection, as you could see here, it indicates a defect. If you see a negative reflections, that is those reflections going below the x-axis, you see a bulge. Okay. Yeah, it is idealized here. The top of the pile, 2L by C time thereafter, you see the response from the toe. Okay, the velocity is positive, indicates it's free end. But if you see any early response, then it indicates a low impedance, or for the board piles, you could treat this as a bulge, necking. So it's very important for this test, the pile top has to be prepared. All the loose concrete has to be removed. Okay, the pile top has to be leveled, nicely grinded, so that you mount the axiometers and then you test. So what you see on the screen is a good pile top preparation. Some of the piles have been capped already before even testings, and finally they realize insistence from the consultant, they want to do the test. Then you have to go and prepare the pile top. So you take this reinforcement outside, bend it outside, otherwise there will be some noise from this reinforcement. The pile top has to be grounded nicely, and then you mount your axiometers and give the impact from the handheld hammers. Take number of blows, multiple blows. If the blow to blow is consistent, then probably you can stop the test. If you see that varied response for each of those blows, then you can acquire as many blows as possible. So generally, if it is a 1000 millimeter diameter pile, so you mount the axiometers at 4 locations and give around 5 to 6 blows at each of those locations, so that this equipment will average out and give you the velocity time histories for this average. Okay, so remove this loose, contaminated or fractured concrete, cut the rebars to a minimum length or bend it outside, make flat spot to attach the accelerometers. This is a very simple pile top preparations, but many times people try to ignore these small aspects, and then if you don't prepare the pile top properly, you will never get the good data. So if you don't get good data, then it is impossible to analyze. And then further it will tempt the testing agency to give some reports which will not going to make any sense. Then thus the file top preparation is the key to get good data, which is also the key to do a best interpretation. And shortcuts always cause questionable data. And as I said, then it is tempting from the testers to give some reports. So grinding on top of surface to make it flat. This is very important. Although the pile top has been nicely prepared, all the loose concrete has been removed. So wherever you're mounting the sensors, you have to grind it, make it level, brush it, and then you mount the sensors with the grease adhesive so that it fits nicely onto the top of the pile. This is unacceptable. You should see a contaminated concrete, it has to be removed. Either it's contaminated or the fractured concrete, and you should always test on sound concrete. This again is not acceptable since you don't grind the surface and make it flat. Attach these axiometers will not be rightly in contact with the pile. Thus, you may not even get any signatures there. These are less than ideal conditions, but the preparation is still acceptable since where the test is performed, the pile has been prepared. Perhaps they would have prepared all around the piles and taken multiple blows. This is again less than ideal condition. I think only at that locations where they're mounting the sensors, it has been grinded. And you see the reinforcement has been bent outside. This is the way it has to be tested, or cut it into minimum. Otherwise, you will see some random noise from this reinforcement because it's a very low strain test. So the test can be conducted with various model of the pile integrity test. You have the velocity model, which is wired. I could see here, this is an axiometers, which has a cable, it can be connected, which can also be a wireless. This is a wireless accelerometers. So the wireless can be connected with just a small palm top type model. So nowadays you have other latest models as well. But regardless of the development of these hardwares, the primary interpretation of the data has remained unchanged, and thus we can just have the original interpretation. So very important on this pile integrity test is to decide the size and type of the hammer to be used. So what size of the hammer fits in? So one size will not fit all the piles, because we know piles have been installed from as short as around 2 meters to as long as around 100 meters. So when you are doing a integrity test for varied length of the piles, one size doesn't suit. So you may have to calibrate different size of the hammer. So what is the effect of these different sizes of the hammers? So if you see a small hammer, you could see a wide pulse, okay? With a small hammer, 1 pound hammer and a 6 pound hammer, you see the pulse width, okay? The pulse width is so large that it will mask if there is any anomaly at the top of the shaft. When you see a wide pulse, the reflection from the defect, as I said, that if there is any positive reflection, it is an anomaly, right, or a defect in the shaft. You see a positive reflection very close to the top of the pile. Okay, so for a wide pulse, the reflection from the defect overlaps the initial pulse, making it even wider. So that means this wide pulse will mask any defect at the top of the pile. Thus, it is important to calibrate with different hammers to ensure that even those anomalies get detected. So use various sizes of the hammer. If the data is consistent, then you calibrate that is the right hammer for that pile size and the length, and then use it for subsequent testing. So if you use a very big hammer, you see a wide pulse, no clear toe reflection, okay? But if you use a small hammer, then you could see some sharp peaks at the top of the pile and also the toe reflection. So if you don't see any toe reflection, then this data cannot be analyzed. So that is very important that the hammer shall be calibrated. So as you can see here, this is a 6 Newton hammer. Around 5.1 meters is the length of the pile. Okay. You have a small hammer. You see the pulse width is very large here. Okay. The small hammer, you see a sharper peak with a lesser pulse width, and also the pile toe is very clear. On the right side is the same 6 Newton hammer. The impulse width is more than 2 meters. Okay, and the toe is not evident. If you don't have any evidence on the toe, this data cannot be analyzed. Okay, so if you use a small size hammer, then you see the pulse width getting shorter with a sharp peak, and the toe is evident. Okay, and the interpretation of the data. So you see a bulge followed by a reduction in the impedance. Essentially, if there is a bulge, then this is returning back to the normal size. Probably this cannot be treated as an anomaly unless you see the positive response ahead of the negative response. Now, this is a sample example of a 10 Newton hammer. You see the pile top, okay, and idealized pile with a pile toe is a beautiful data, and also the pile is very good. You don't see any positive reflection. Okay. Idealized pile would travel, this data should travel along the axis. If you see this is below the axis, maybe due to soil resistance. This is about 55-meter deep pile. Okay, and you use a 147 Newton hammer, around 15 kgs. There you could see the response from the toe. Okay, all along the length of the pile, I think it is free from any defect. Testing for a tower foundation, which is on piles. You see the velocity time history. You could see a positive reflection happening ahead of the toe, right? If you detect any kind of anomaly like this or a pile defect, the practice is to core the pile. Apparently, our country, we don't do that, but in US, they ask the contractor to core. If you core the concrete and remove the concrete cores, you see the contamination of the concrete, which is a defect, which is very well identified by this pile integrity test. So you have a data here. What do you construe from this data? Is it a good pile or a bad pile? Probably there is a bulge here, okay, but then followed by a positive response where the diameter of the pile or impedance is coming back to the normal diameter, but then the magnitude is much larger than it should be. So therefore, it could be a bad pile where the neck can be interpreted to be between 7.5 to around 10 meters in this zone. You can also run a profile analysis, which can very well evaluate there is a cross-sectional changes indicating there is a bulge and then there is a neck followed by a neck. Okay. This is another data. You see a bulge, okay, and then you followed by the necking here. So if this interpreted cross section is less than, say, some percent, or 80%, probably you may have to reconsider to accept this pile, conduct a load test. If it is more than 80-85% of the cross section, I think the benefit should go to the contractor, where the drill shaft can never be idealized to be a cylindrical piece because of the uncertainty, the soil conditions. There will always be a variation in the pile geometry. This is an idealized pile. Perhaps now all of you can interpret, is it to be a bad pile or a good pile? Obviously on the x-axis you don't see any positive response, clear toe reflection happening, okay, and this will be due to your soil effects, and thus it can be treated as a good pile. The integrity is fine, no issues on the integrity, okay. And you can run a profile analysis to evaluate the shape of the pile geometry. I think there is no problem in this, and the concrete volume it has consumed is around 10%. So if you know this information, it's very useful information to interpret the data. If you know the pile volumes, then probably it will be very helpful in deriving this profile analysis, preferably along the length of the pile. Okay. It is very seldom that the contractors will record those concrete volumes along the length of the pile. But you can have an overall consumption of the concrete, and if you see that an excess consumption of the concrete, it can also lead to the bulge, and that's where you see an increase in the cross section of the pile. If there is a reduction in the consumption, then you can always evaluate that pile could have some defect. This is another idealized pile. You see that there could be some extra consumption of the concrete at this point of time, a clear toe reflection, and a very beautiful shaft. No issues on this. So what do you make of this data here? 027 velocity time history, the top of the pile. Okay, there could be some small bulge here, clear toe reflection. This can be treated as a good pile. This you have a negative response first, coming back to normalcy. So there could be a bulge here, and this one has a positive response very close to the pile top. That could be a defect. So what it indicates is a good pile, pile with a bulge, and pile with severe defect at the top of the pile. All right, now the data what people collect will not be as idealized as we have discussed. Now there will be lot of issues with the data because of the site conditions. Sometimes the length of the pile, the resistance, soil resistance, masking those penetration of the compression wave. We may have to condition the data for further interpretations, but I'm not going to talk on those conditioning and the interpretation of the data because of the paucity of the time. So that will be covered as a part of the training to have an hands-on experience on the data interpretations. So I can just demonstrate one classical example of this data. You could see here, this is the top of the pile, idealized, then you see the toe response. The pile length that was furnished by the contractor will be around 55 feet, but the pile integrity test is evaluating the pile length to be around 42 feet. Okay. Now, many times we also have this experience. The limitations of this pile integrity test in estimating the length of the pile. The wave speed itself for a concrete is not constant. It varies as the strength varies, it varies as the age of the concrete varies. So therefore, plus or minus 5% in the variation of the wave speed is not uncommon, and thus the pile length interpreted by the pile integrity test in the order of about 5 plus or minus 5%, around 10% is not uncommon as well. So now you see here 55 feet to around 42 feet. I think probably this is a short pile. So this is very important to have as accurate information as possible. Okay. So now this ringing noise can be filtered out using the low pass filter or the wavelets. There's one options available, so the ringing tone can be eliminated to a smooth curve. by applying the filters. I'm not discussing on these things, but I want to highlight that this is a short pile than what the data was furnished by the contractor. So very clearly, if you have a TOR response, it could be detected. The length of the pile can also be detected in addition to the anomaly. There are also some data that interprets as a mirror image than the data you have seen so far. Some of the European equipments will have an opposite interpretations than the American system. So you see the velocity time history. So instead of the first peak being positive, there is a negative first peak, and then the TOR response also will be the opposite one. So if you look at or have an opportunity to see this data as a mirror image, don't get confused. These are European equipment that captures the signatures. Of late, I was also told and understand that even those European equipment has redesigned their hardware so that the data will be similar to the American system as well. But there are many equipments in the market that gives you a mirror image of the interpretation. So don't get confused on that. Okay. Now, what is the advantage of this PIT? This is fast, which is inexpensive. The equipment is mobile. You see, that's very, very handy. You can just carry it in a small box. Minimum site support is necessary for this. You can test many piles. 100% of the piles is being tested. So if 8 hours of work, if the pile tops are prepared nicely, you could test around 30 to 35 piles or maybe 40 piles per shift. There's no advanced planning required except preparing the top of the pile. The minimum pile surface preparation, as you could see, is just only removing the concrete, grinding, make it level. And this integrity test finds major defects. Okay. The limitation is it cannot locate defect after it has already located the first major defect. Okay. And also the limit to the length to diameter ratio, which is generally as a thumb rule L by D of about 30. But then if you have a very soft glaze of greater thickness, maybe some 20-30 meters on the top, then this L by D usually can go up to maybe 150 to 60. We have successfully tested as well. But if you have strong soils from the top of the pile and the length, the resistance will mask the penetration or impede the penetrations of these stress waves, and thus you have to use slightly bigger hammer, and then the thumb rule says that L by D of about 30. This is just a guideline, is not a strict rule. The cracks or joints blocks the waves. Suppose it is a jointed precast piles. Okay, if you are conducting an integrity test, only the first section, if it is a segmental precast, about 8 to 14 meters is common. The top 8 to 14 meters can be evaluated accurately, and there is a cracks or joints. For the subsequent sections, it will block the downward traveling waves, and thus you will not be able to evaluate the integrity beyond the cracks, joints or the cracks. Now, if you see a clear positive reflection, this is a defect. Okay, and what you could see thereafter will be the secondary waves, secondary reflections from these defects. That's why if you locate a major defect, you cannot locate any further defect, and what you could see here could be a secondary reflection from this major defect itself. Now, shafts with multiple or highly variable impedance changes produce complex records which are very difficult or impossible to analyze after the first or second major reflex. Therefore, we have to understand the limitations of the test and make use of the best advantages of this test. This is a very simple quality control test which could identify major defects consistently. If there is any installation issues, then that could always be corrected, and the contractor can change his installation procedures to eliminate those kind of defects during the construction. Now, this is based on the wave propagation theory. There is another integrity method that is also available. We call it as cross-hole sonic logging method. This is frequently specified to detect defects on drill shafts. Since drill shafts are very few in number, each one is more critical for a flyover, for a metro rail piers. You will have only 4 drill shafts, maybe 5 drill shafts per pier. So each one of them is very important, that you need to ensure that the quality of the drill shafts are not compromised, right? So integrity is one of the method. The other methods is this cross-hole sonic logging test. So this cross-hole sonic logging comprise of embedding the access tubes. Normally it is a steel or a PVC pipe. Okay, it is connected to the reinforcement cage prior to pouring the concrete. The general guidelines for the number of tubes will be, for every 300 millimeter diameter will be 1 tube. So for example, if you have 1200 millimeters, you have 4 tubes around the periphery. Okay, so once the concrete is poured, then after few days, maybe some second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, you may have to calibrate testing every day, ensure that what is the correct time that you need to test, because you have to allow for curing. If you allow long time, if it is a PVC, there will be a debonding issues. Therefore, it will not detect the defect of the concrete, but the defect of the debonding issues. Okay, so once you have embedded these access tubes and pour the concrete after certain curing periods, say 3 days to 5 days, then you insert these ultrasonic probes, which will transmit sonic waves, which is emitted from one tube and received from the other tube. Okay, and the concrete quality is evaluated. So how? So you can do that time measurements between the transmitter and the receivers and pull these sensors all the way up. At every 50 millimeters of the probe distance, it will record the data. Okay, so you need to know the length of these access tubes for which you are testing various combination. If you have 4 number of tubes, if you want to test all the parts, it will be 6 trials. The measurements required to define the geometry is about 5 trials. As an example, if you have a 6 number of tubes with a large diameter pile, so all the parts will have about 15 trials, but you could have about 9 parts to define the geometry. This is one between these tubes. This will be the other one, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and those dotted red lines can cover the remaining ones. So as a thumb rule, n minus 2 times 2 into plus 1 will give the minimum measurements required to define the geometry. Okay, now this could be connected to this tablet called the cross-hole analyzer. So these 4 wires will go into those 4 probes. So these are trans receivers. It can now transmit as well as it can record. So 4 probes at a time you can place it. One transmits and that also receives from the other signatures, and you can pull it simultaneously. Okay, you see the probes have been installed and you are pulling this. So we also commissioned this as a part of our accreditation program for the cross-hole test. There are 2 piles you could see here. One is with defect, the other one is without defect, to evaluate at what level the defect is there. So which is very nicely indicated by this cross-hole sonic logging test, and thus we got this accreditation process. So one transmits the signals and the other one receives the signals after a transit time. So this time is very important. You know the wave speed of the concrete, you know the anomaly in the concrete. There is a different time like this, right? So this data will create a waterfall black and white waterfall diagram. So this is your first arrival time. If there is any delay in the first arrival time, that indicates your defect in the pile. Okay. Okay, you could see here, this is the arrival time. So if there is any delay in the arrival time, that will be an indications of the defect. You know the spacing, you know the arrival time between the pulses, thus your wave speed can be recorded. So if it's a uniform wave speed throughout the length of the concrete, then it's the same. But if you have a varied arrival time, then your wave speed changes, and thus this defect can be clearly identified. So how to find defects? You find the defects by these signatures of the first arrival time and also the signal strength. A reduced energy and a delayed arrival time indicates a defect. It's a very simple test, interpreting flaws and defects. It can be a good if you have a 10% increase in the arrival time, between 10 to 20%. It is questionable, poor or flaw, poor or defect. This is how we need to categorize based on the data and put it in the reports. And then does the client make a decision to accept this file or not? Okay. And you could automatically find the defects. You see the first arrival times, and these are the defects. Okay, as you could also see, the delay in the arrival time indicates a lower wave speed. Lower wave speed is contamination in the concrete. So test, when to test? As I said, it has to be allowed for curing. Generally, after day 3, you start testing 4, 5, 6 days. So you have consistency in the dairying. Maybe 3 days is a good time for you to do the test. So that is how you need to calibrate at a particular point of time. But some guidelines, say French norm, requires the test to be carried out after 7 days. If you use a PVC tube, there will be a debonding issue throughout the length of the pile. So thus you need to test as quick as possible. Between 3 to 5 days is a good time to test this using cross-hole sonic logging test. Okay, now you could, I clearly identify that the defect is at the top of the pile. Okay, anybody can identify if the data is very good. And here the defect could be at the bottom of the pile because you don't see any arrival time at the bottom. Okay, so this is exactly proven when the piles were exhumed. You see the defect in the bottom of the pile. Okay. And the pile top anomaly throughout the length of the pile beyond this point, around 10 meters. I think the drill shafts are fine. In the top, you see there is a contamination. The concrete placed through water in the top 10 feet, sorry, it's not meters, it is feet, because of a TREMI problem. And finally, they core the concrete to see that the bleeding was clearly visible, and thus the shaft was rejected. So this is about the cross-hole sonic logging test. I'll go to the last aspect on the high strength dynamic test. So I just recap now. We discussed about the shaft quantitative identification device SQUID, which will evaluate the thickness of the contaminations in the pile borehole. We also discussed about the shaft area profile evaluator, which can give an accurate assessment on the geometry of the pile, that is the pile radius, the excavation volume, and the alignment of the pile itself. We also discussed on the low strain integrity test. We discussed on the cross-hole sonic logging test as a part of the integrity measurements. Now I'll move to the high strain dynamic test. The theoretical background is the same for a low strain and a high strain. Only the pulses will be different. The low strain will have a low pulse, small pulses. In a high strain, you have a massive pulse. All of us know the static test. We put the cartilage either by putting the weight like this, sandbags, or the concrete blocks. Now these days you can also use the reaction methods to do a static load test. Okay, but the dynamic test consists of embedding the strain gauge and the accelerometers. I already explained this on the top of the pile. Usually these sensors are mounted around 1.5 to 2 times the diameter below the pile top. Okay, and this is connected to the pile driving analyzer. So under the impact of the hammer at the top of the pile, the stress waves propagates all along the length of the pile, but you can count at the pile base, it has a reflection. And when it comes back to the sensor location, that is 2 times the distance length of the pile divided by the wave speed will be the time at which you can see the pile toe response. I already explained this. Right. Now, it's very important to calibrate these equipments. The hardware itself has to be calibrated, and also the sensor, the strain gauge and accelerometer has to be calibrated once in 2 years. That is a requirement as per the ASTM standards. I think probably it is good to keep that so that you are ensuring that the quality of the data is very good. As I said, the force and velocity are proportional. So if they are proportional, they are on top of each other, as you could see here on the top left gram. So the force and velocity are proportional. So when you see an impact event on this large screen, the force and velocity are proportional at the top of the pile, and thereafter there is a separation of the waves. The velocity and the force are getting separated before the 2L by C time is reached. So this separation of waves indicates there is a resistance being activated, that is your skin frictions along the length of the pile. If there is no resistance, then the force and velocity are on top of each other because they are proportional. Okay. So here you see a classical data. This is a force time history. Force is by strain gauge, velocity multiplied by incident because they are proportional. Therefore, force, velocity, both of them are force unit versus time. So this is the top of the pile, 2L by C time. Thereafter, you see the response from the pile bottom. You see the velocity is positive. Velocity is positive, indicating your free end. Okay. And velocity is negative here. It indicates your fixed end. Okay. This is easy driving. This is your hard driving. Okay. So wherever there is a separation of waves, you can estimate that this is because of the soil resistance. Okay. Here also this is because of the soil resistance. The soil resistance starts from this point of times all along the length of the pile. Okay. So this is very straightforward interpretation of the data. So the same thing I am recapping here. Velocity is positive, velocity is negative. You can also see this data as a downward traveling wave, the blue lines, and an upward traveling wave. At the pile toe, this is 2L by C time. You see a tensile response here, the tensile response indicating your positive velocity. On the contrary, you see a compressive response at the toe, and also the velocity is negative. It indicates hard driving. Okay. Now, what is CAPAP software? So this is the data that you acquire from pile driving analyzer when you conduct the test. So post this test, the CAPAP is a sophisticated gold standard trial and error software. This analysis is made on the PDA data after the test is complete. This is a signal matching technique. It computes the resistance distribution, the end bearing and the side friction, compute the dynamic properties of the soil, and this is very useful in premature refusal of the pile. So now we know the measured downward traveling wave. So the downward traveling wave is an input from the hammer, and the upward traveling wave is the response from the pile. Okay. So you bring the signatures to the CAPAP, you apply this downward traveling wave because this is measured, force and velocity are measured, then calculate the complementary or a computed upward traveling wave, as you can see in the red color, right? So this computed one can be compared with the measured upward traveling wave from the pile driving analyzer. Okay. What we do not know here is the system in between. So arbitrarily you can assign some values for the resistance between the base and the shaft. Okay. Now when you compute this, compare this with the measured signatures. If they are on top of each other, then your analysis is complete. That means you have determined your system in the first place. But most of the cases, almost 99.9 times of the cases, it's not possible because you have to iteratively do that. So if it doesn't match here, the computed and the measured signatures, you have to go back and change your system. And thus you do a trials until the computed and measures are matching. So it is how it is. So the black one is the measured signatures and the red one is the computed signatures. It is not matching, right? So then you go and change your resistance distributions. It is coming closer. The next trial, you adjust your damping values. It is still coming closer. The value is getting closer to the measured values. Adjust your soil quakes. It's almost there. Maybe you have to do some small adjustments, increase the total capacity, and finally the unloading parameters. So now you see the computed and measured signatures are on top of each other here compared to the first trial, right? So this completes your CAPAP analysis. This is the trial and error analysis. Okay, this completes the analysis. Once you complete, you see that the measured and the computed signature on top of each other, you go to the output. So what you see in the output, this is your raw data from the pile driving analyzer, force, velocity, time history. This is the top of the pile, 2L by C time. Thereafter, you see the response. Okay. Now this is a pile model. This will be derived. If you know the geometry of the pile, you can input. Maybe if the geometry is unknown, you can also determine by analyzing change in the geometry. This is a Uniskin friction distributions along the length of the pile, right? And then you have more resistance at the bottom of the pile. You see the measured and the computed signatures are on top of each other. Okay, this completes the analysis. Now this will also give you the total resistance, the skin friction component, and the end bearing component. So this curve is an equivalent static load distribution curve. You know, the total resistance is a summation of your static component and the dynamic component, and this CAPAP computes the dynamic components, subtracts from the total and give you the static resistance, and this is an equivalent static load distribution curve. Okay, this is the output from the CAPAP. This is another example of a very long pile, steel offshore pile. You see the pile geometry here. You have a driving shoe. These are driven in different sections. You see the stabbing guides, which increases the wall thickness there. This is a mudline wall thickness. Okay, the distribution of the resistance, the unit skin friction distribution, that the certain depth is a very low unit skin friction distribution. If you go back to geotechnical data, it indicates these are sand layers. Obviously, this is expected that sand layers will have a very less unit skin friction compared to the clay layers. The analysis is complete, is very good. Both the computed and the measured signatures are on top of each other. This gives you the total resistance, skin friction component, and the end bearing component. Okay, this is about the CAPAP. So let us see some case studies, and then I will conclude in another 5 minutes time. So this is a latest model, the 8th generation model, which has a lot of features. Okay, as I said, to the pile integrity test, even this, the hardware has been developed from the last 30, 40 years, but the original interpretation has never changed. Your force time histories remain the same, your end conditions remain the same. Thus, we are happy that the original interpretation has not changed, although the hardware has made a lot of changes. Okay, to do a test, you mount this sensor. Again, the pile top has to be prepared. I'll come to that. On the top of the pile below, around 1.1 to 2 times the diameter, you mount the strain gauge and axometers, at least a pair of them on opposite side with a cushion and an impact. So this impact for testing board piles, you can use around 1 to 2% of the ultimate capacity to be proved. Okay, 1% for a rock socketed pile and 2% for a friction pile. When you give an impact, then the pile driving analyzer will acquire these force time histories. So this is your 2L by C. At 2L by C, you see the response of the toe, right? The information required is the pile geometry, the grade of concrete, volume of concrete, steel reinforcement, geotechnical or the soil boring information. The steel reinforcement is necessary because you can compute what is the allowable stresses, and during the test you can limit that the stresses doesn't exceed than the allowable stress. What is the load to be proved is very important information. So accordingly, you can mobilize what is the dead weight required. So as I said, 1 to 2% of the ultimate capacity to be proved. And it is also very important that the pile length available for the test area is necessary. Like this, you can actually grow the test sections above the ground, or you could excavate around the pile and prepare these test sections. So usually around 2 to 2.5 times the diameter of the pile should be available for you to instrument and test these piles. Okay. And growing the pile, preparing the test sections should be again loose from all contaminated loose concrete. It should be a sound concrete and reinforced even at the top, and prepare the pile top with concrete and level it nicely, and you see the good pile top preparation. Sometimes if people do not understand the proper practice, you could also see the pile tops weirdly being prepared. If you mount these kind of sensitive sensors to these unprepared pile tops, 200% you will not get the data, and also it damages the sensors, right? So This is also not acceptable. You have to prepare this with concrete and not mortar. Okay. So how about this? The pile surface has not been grinded nicely, leveled, and again the instruments, the very sensitive instruments are mounted. You see this is an unguided drop. Okay, pile tops are not prepared properly, and you mount your sensors is an unprepared pile top, which will not give you any data. If you don't reinforce it, then with an impact, small impact, the pile top will break, and then it deters your progress. Now you cannot do any further tests. You have to redo the pile top preparations and come back to site. So do it right at the first place. So you mount your sensors. So it's a good practice that you have to use around 4 strain gauges around 90 degrees apart, particularly while you're testing board piles, because board piles are more susceptible for bending. So what happens if you mount only 2 sensors? If one is not giving you any data, you have to clip the opposite pair, right? But if you mount 4 sensors, you can take the average of all 4. If one is not giving you good data, you can clip off those pair and use the other pair. At least you have the data. So it's a good practice to use 4 strain gauges, as you could see here, particularly for testing the board piles. Yeah, the 4th one is on the other side. Okay, so prepare the pile top, mount the sensors, 4 strain gauges, axiometers 2 is good enough. Then you put your wooden cushion striker plate with a guide, and then you can give an impact. When you give an impact, this pile driving analyzer captures your force, velocity, time history. So dropping system can also be varied across the world. This is a very unguided, so probably we want to avoid this kind of dropping system. You may have to use a guided drop to reduce your bending. Even if you use the guides, it has to be safe. As you could see here, the dead weights are toppling, so safety issues has to be taken care on the site. Okay, in order to mitigate this, we actually try to have a donut system of dropping with a model, and fabricated the prototype with a 3-ton dead weight. I think I'll play the video now. The sensors are mounted below the pile top. Okay, and now it is connected to the pile driving analyzer. So you're cutting off those links, which will give an impact to the top of the pile. Yes. So this gives an impact, and you acquire the post time histories. So there are many driving system guided impacts that you can use it depending on the site conditions. All over the world, there are many. As the loads increases, you may have to actually design those guides so that you will have a good impact without causing any bending. At the same time, it is also safe. Okay, so this is a 40-ton in Philippines, even in India now, even in Bangalore. So we are testing the metro piles. We have this guide system, which also around 40 tons dead weight. So what you see the screen after the test is complete is a force, velocity, time history. This is your 2L/c time. Okay, you see the proportionality at the first peak is unity here, that indicates you have good data. At every blow you could get your energy transfer to the pile is your EMX. Okay, the stresses, CSX is your average of those strain stresses. CSI is the maximum of the individual stresses. So you can get your tensile stresses, compressive stresses, the proportionality, energy transfer for every blow that you test. Okay. So what do you construct from this data? Now, okay, this is your 2L/c time. Okay, before the bottom of the pile, the response starts activating here. The velocity is going up. Okay, so if this happens at the toe, it indicates your free end, but it's happening just ahead of the toe. Okay, crisscross of force and velocity is indicating damage. Okay, or a reduction in the impedance. Okay, that is how you see in the upward traveling wave also. This is dotted line is an upward traveling wave. This you are getting a tensile deflection, that is a decreasing in your magnitudes, creating a tensile deflections before your 2L/c time. So that indicates your change in the impedance or a damage to the pile. So this can very well be modeled in the CAPAP software. You see that the geometry of the pile, you are modeling this necking here. If you don't model this and make it uniform pile, perhaps your matching will not happen between the computed and the measured signature. So this is imperative that you need to adopt this in order for you to match the signature. Okay. And as I already explained, this will give an equivalent static load distribution curve. Okay. Now we saw this data without preparing the pile top properly. Okay, unprepared pile top with unguided drop weight. So what you see here, all the capacity from the 6-7 tests in one of the projects has been reported to have achieved between 412 to 423 metric tons. What they required was around 415 metric tons. But when you do an inspection of the data, this is the raw data. Okay, force and velocity are proportional, right? When the force and velocity are proportional, which is on top of each other, there is zero resistance. But what you see here, the reported values of 420 metric tons, the skin friction and the end bearing, I think the software will not do this kind of mischief, right? So if you don't get data, you're tempted always to give some values, but this was a part of a forensic investigation, so we could figure out that the data quality is bad and the results have been manipulated. Bad piles. So what you could see is a force time history. Okay, this is your toe at 2L by C time. So before the toe, there is a rise in the velocity. Okay, positive velocity, it indicates that there could be some impedance change, which we already saw that in the previous case study. Okay, and crisscross of force and velocity indicates damage. And there's a tensile reflection in the upward traveling wave. So the blue one is an upward traveling wave. Usually if you have this tensile reflection at the toe, it is a free end, but you're getting a free end ahead of the toe. That means it indicates there is an impedance reduction or a damage, clearly. Even then you model in the CAPAP, unless you model this change in the geometry of the pile, you will not have this match happening here. So it can clearly indicate that there is a clear damage of the pile below a certain level, which is very well can be interpreted from the data itself. Okay. So the last case study, this one is a data of a good pile. You see the 4 sensors, the difference in 4 sensors, ideally all of 4 of them should be on top of each other. So it indicates no bending, but you cannot expect no bending for testing board piles. You will definitely see a severe bending in the board piles. So that's where if you take the average of these 4 and compare that with the axiometer, probably that will give you a good proportionality. Okay, but here we can see that one axiometer A1, the first axiometer V1, is having good proportionality with the force 3 and force. So the force 1 and 2 has been clipped off because of severe bending. So if you use this one axiometers and the other pair, it gives you a very good proportionality, and this data is extremely good to be used. And you see that after a certain time, the force velocity proportionality is there at the first peak. Then there is a separation of the wave. It indicates the resistance distribution along the length of the shaft. Okay, in the upward traveling wave also there is an increase in the upward traveling wave. It indicates a linearly increasing resistance along the length of the shaft. This also can be visualized in the CAPAP analysis, which also gives you a linearly increasing resistance along the length of the shaft. So the results of the dynamic pile load test must be evaluated by a qualified and experienced geotechnical engineer. There are many literatures published showing good correlations between the static and the dynamic load test, and this has been reported by several researchers. As you could see here, now the database has increased a lot. Okay, between the dynamic load test and the static load test. All that we can say, the Davison criteria, there is an offset limit, correlates very well with the static load distribution curve. Okay. Now, as far as the codal practice, the low strain integrity test is codified even in the IS code 14893. But for the high strain dynamic test, still it is not codified in the Bureau of Indian Standards. There was a committee formed, CED 43, which has released the working draft for this high strength dynamic test of reinforced concrete board piles in 2016. We are already around 5 years from the working draft. Still, the Bureau of Indian Standards has not blessed us with the codes. I'm sure they are working on it to release it soon. To sum up, this pile driving analyzer is proven worldwide application, confirms capacity at large loads, reduced testing time and large cost savings. PDA with CAPAP evaluates capacity at low cost for driven piles, drill shafts and auger cast piles. This also gives an extra valuable information on the integrity, stresses, hammer energy, potentially saves time, improves quality control by more number of pile tests that can be done on a site, and this will replace static tests, particularly for offshore piles where it is impractical to bring in that kind of templates to do the static load test. So with this, I will conclude my presentation. I thank the organizer for giving me an opportunity to share some experience. I hope it was useful. I'll now happy to take any questions if you have. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your valuable information, that is practical experiences with us. Participants, if there are any queries, please post it in the chat box.
Hello, sir. This is Jivan.
Yes. Yes, Jivan.
Sir, you were telling there are defects in board piles, isn't it, sir? So during the cast institute piles, if you are filling concrete from the bottom to top, there is less probability of defects only, sir. Isn't it, sir?
Now, how do we fill the pile? From bottom to top only? No, you will fill. It is a treme concreting. It will be from bottom to top only, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the pile constructions can lead to anomalies, and the defects can be for various reasons. No, one is your treme. Always the treme pipe should be in the concrete, right? So sometimes the operators pulls it out. Then there is a necking. I mean, the soil inclusions are happening at any length of the pile that can create your anomaly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is.
Then, sir, if there is any defects, like say at 20 meter, what you will be advising, sir? Then how to repair it?
Okay. You're seeing in some of the presentation, some of the slides, that if there is a major defect, okay, that can be identified by the test methods, that also corroborated by coring the concrete pile. Okay. Now, if you have a major defect where it compromises your geometry of the pile, that is the minimum cross-section area available at that particular depth, if it is more than 85%, then you give the benefit to the contractor and use that pile, because no, you are not using a single pile. It's always in the group. There will be some redistribution of loads in the group. But if you have a major defect which reduces your cross-sectional area by more than 25-30%, then you may have to reduce the load carrying capacity, or maybe some additional remedial measures. That has to be evaluated case by case basis. Okay, there are two questions has come here. This type of test will be carried on any type of concrete pile. Yeah, it depends on the test. We discussed on the low strain integrity test and the high strain integrity test. Those two tests can be tested on any type of pile. Okay. but the cross-hole sonic logging test, it has to be done only on the board piles because you need the pile preparation on inserting the access tubes. You cannot do on a precast concrete piles. Okay, and there's a next question. How will you decide on the number of tests to be carried out to determine the capacity of the pile? So there's no guidelines available at this point of time, but then there are some guidelines worldwide that for the low strain integrity test, 100% of the piles will be tested. For the high strains, it will be somewhere between 2 to 15%. So depend on the codes that you're following. Australia says higher percentage, US says around 10%. Some guidelines says it is around 2 to 5%. So it depends which guidelines and specifications you're following. So the general thumb rule capacity of the piles, around 5% of the piles will be tested. It will be a reasonably good number.
So then during the earthquake mechanism, sir, how this pile will work? Like if we are calculating the bearing capacity through end bearing as well as friction, during that earthquake moment, the friction may last because of the particle rearrangement. Then
Correct.
the pile will be entirely goes on end bearing. Will it be okay then, or it may be failure may occur, sir?
No, that's a design issue, sir. It's not a testing issue. So if a liquefaction is a concern, but what you do is you install a pile and you test it, right? So it won't liquefy at when the time of testing. So what you evaluate is at the time of testing. But that has to be considered in your design itself. If there is a liquefaction potential is there, so probably you may have to ignore that capacity from that length of the pile, and then you have to do some other remedial measures there, increase the wall thickness or whatever other methods.
Okay, okay.
How to counteract the negative skin friction pile where it occurs? Okay, the measurements will not detect any negative skin friction. In case there is a very soft clays, particularly the under-consolidated clays, which will induce negative friction. One way to mitigate is to coat the pile either by bitumen or by any other chemicals so that the friction will not induce on the piles, adding additional loads. The other way is to work out that numerical value and then reduce in your allowable capacity of the pile itself. And this will happen only when you have a deep seated, very soft clays. Sensors available to measure the settlements of the pile. So these sensors will not be used for measuring the settlements over the long period of time. You can mount any strain gauge and then take periodic measurements to evaluate if the piles are settling or not. I think there's no more questions coming up.
Okay, sir. Sir, one more question.
Yeah, go ahead. Okay, I think there's one more question. Can you test concrete deterioration using tests you described by you? Probably not. More than the material, it is the soil structure interaction on estimating the capacity and integrity of the pile is to evaluate the defect, but not the actually material deterioration.
I hope there are no questions further, sir. So one more question.
I am in Mumbai. To protect the soil, use a shore pile. For this, any option. Shore piles, it can be a touch pile, it can be a secant pile. All you can do the integrity of those piles. That will be very useful, because you don't know if you are using a board pile, either it is a touch pile or a secant pile, and you want that integrity to be good. So you can do an integrity test on those piles as well before the excavation happens. These methods cannot give you any soil arching effects. No. And all we talked on the capacity is all the axial capacity itself, and nothing on the lateral.
Okay, sir, I think there are no more questions.
Yep.
Okay, once again, on behalf of our management and the organizing team, I would like to thank you very much for immediately accepting our invitation and sharing your valuable experiences with us. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Participants, kindly fill the feedback form, and the afternoon session will start by 2 p.m. So kindly join before 5 minutes. Thank you.
Ma'am, please stop the recording, ma'am. Geetamani, ma'am.